Hello there, it's Coach Craig Kenneth.
And it's Coach Victoria.
Today we have a caller with us that is going to be talking about going from depression, trying to work through it and get to a good place within himself. One of the things that we see is that when somebody is depressed, it often leads to them being neglectful in a relationship, withdrawn, not being there for their partner, and it causes a lot of breakups. A lot of times, someone that is depressed will actually end the relationship as well
Hmm.
because they don't have the energy to keep giving the relationship what it needs.
Right. And on the other side of things, you can also get lost in a relationship.
Yeah.
You can kind of start to lose your purpose and you can hyper focus on a person and trying to make them happy while trying to manage your own happiness and joy. And so it can be really challenging.
So today we got a caller that was struggling with some issues, trying to work through them. He's having a lot of success, but life is full of ups and downs, so there's going to be challenges along the way.
Hmm.
So we're going to call him Mike. Mike, are you there with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Mike, can you tell us a little bit about what's going on? Tell us a little bit about yourself and share some of the struggles that you've been having.
Yeah, so I was in a 5-year relationship with a woman, and I met her about when I was 29, and she was about 38. She's now 43. I'm 34, and we were together for 5 years, and for the most part, it was great. But back in February, we ended up breaking up for a second time, and the months have gone by, and I realized that I kind of lost. Um, not I guess lost focus for my purpose. And I'm an entrepreneur. I do a handful of different things, and it's very mind consuming and time consuming. So, going through a breakup, as a lot of us know, is really hard and kind of just, punches you in the brain, and now your thoughts are scattered and it's hard to focus.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
So,
Can I
for
pause you for a second?
yeah, of course.
We were talking about the breakup a minute ago. Did you see signs of a breakup leading up to it, or was it like a surprise when it happened?
Mm, Well, having been coached by you prior, and have done some inner work myself with various books and stuff, I, in a sense, didn't really see anything, even having the knowledge. But then when I reflected a little bit on the relationship here and there, I could now see kind of that the person that I was with, I felt like was struggling a lot more than I was in certain aspects of their life. Kind of like what you were just saying with when someone's depressed, they'd end the relationship. And you really can't be in a relationship if you're not happy with yourself. And so I think that had a lot to do with it.
Hmm.
Absolutely. So you're saying that your ex at the time was struggling with her own mental health and depression?
Yes.
Okay. And how did you see that showing up in the relationship or with her?
Um, just certain ways she would act. More importantly, she, you know, at times of being vulnerable, which, I appreciated because it's, really hard sometimes to open up to others, especially if, you've been in a family that really doesn't do that, which is where she came from. And she was able to open up, ask me things like this, where she literally was like, hey, are you happy? And I just stared at her and I said, yeah, of course. Why? She goes, I just see people outside sometimes smiling at the sky and with their dog and just doing little things. And I can, at least looks like they're happy. And she's like, I want that. And I
Mm.
just looked at her, and in my head, I was like, oh my gosh, like that's so sad. What can I do to make her feel better about herself, or help her have self-love? And that's kind of where I started to really see that this person that I was with for 5 years was lacking self-love, which was leaking into our relationship, where she couldn't even receive the love I was giving her.
Wow. So you had been with each other for a long time. And
Mhm.
sometimes when you're with somebody for a long time and the changes are slow, you don't really notice
Hmm.
until they say a comment like that, where you're
Mhm.
like, wow, you're not really yourself. And I hadn't really even, I'm so used to you being the way you've been, I didn't really realize you were struggling so much.
Yeah, exactly. It's like working out, you know, you keep looking at yourself in the mirror and you don't see anything change, right? But God forbid you take the mirror away for 3 months and you've been going really hard at the gym and you've been eating healthy, you're going to notice it absolutely 100%.
Sure. So, what happened with the breakup? What did she say? And can you talk a little bit about that and what that meant for you and how that affected you?
Yeah. So did you want to like know like the actual like night and day that we
Well,
uh all
there
that
was,
happened?
well, you could touch upon it a little bit so people have
Yeah.
an idea, a little reference.
Just about the
Uh-huh.
context.
Yeah. So that night, everything, well, actually the night before, we were supposed to go to a concert together and everything seemed fine. So I was out having some drinks and trying to actually clear my head because I could tell that something was off within the relationship. And it was one of those signs that I learned from you guys is that she started to take space and started staying home at night at her place instead of mine. I was like, huh, okay, I know what she's doing. Just let her be. She needs space. I get it. So I know something's up, and I say, okay, well, I'm going to go do my thing and just have a couple of beverages, clear my mind, and have a good time, people watch. And long story short, you know, I got a little more buzzed than I thought and couldn't really remember when I got home. But, I called her in the morning and said, hey, I walked around the block a couple of times, tried to clear my head, did this and that. And she was like, oh, okay. Everything seemed fine. Uh, we go to the show, and I could tell right off the bat something was wrong because she had a different uh, approach to hanging out. So usually she always comes over and I'll drive. She had me pick her up. I show up. She's already intoxicated, which was another sign. So that was two signs of, okay, this is getting really weird. Something's wrong. And then we drive to the show. She's awkward in the car, but I'm still making her laugh. And then we get to the show. She starts drinking more. And I'm like, this is really weird because she's not a big drinker. And well, I mean, I guess it's different now, but she's usually moderate with it. And by the end of the show, actually halfway through the show, I guess, because it wasn't over when it all happened, but she then, just staring at me and making really weird faces like she's angry. And I was like, okay, are you all right? And she goes, oh, yeah, no, I'm just a little buzzed. And in my head, I'm like, no, something's definitely wrong, but okay. And then she says, hey, can we go outside? And I say, yeah, let's get some fresh air. And she pulls
That's not too bad.
yeah, right. I know. She pulls, this is when I knew it was real bad. She pulls up a stool and she says, sit. And I go, wow, you must really want me to sit down. I've never seen you do this before.
Are
And
you
she's
gonna
like,
me too?
and so, I sit down and she's like, okay, I'm going to give you one chance. What did you do last night? And I said,
Uh-oh.
what? And I said, what do you mean? I already told you. And she goes, no, what did you do last night? And I said, I don't understand. I told you. And she goes, I saw, because we have our location services, right? Sharing. She's like, I saw uh, you went to courts. Did you go to courts? And I said, yeah, I did. I went to courts. And she goes, I saw you go to this place. And I go, yep, I did. And I was like, I'll even do you one more. I also stopped here before I went home. And she's like, and then, not to curse or anything, she just went off and was like calling me a liar and the B word and the C word and all the words and
Ouch.
stormed out of the place. And, you know, I just walked and followed her because she was, in it. We were in an area that you don't want to walk alone, especially as a woman that's intoxicated at night. And so I followed her and she was just like, leave me alone, leave me alone. And I'm trying to just get to the bottom of it. I'm like, I don't understand. What did I lie about? I told you everything, yada, yada, yada.
And
And
did she think you cheated?
I think, yeah, that's exactly what she thought. And she thought I lied. She thought I cheated on her. And you know, earlier that night, I was on my phone with my friends, just talking about them, to what about whatever to clear my head too. So they even knew what I was doing.
Yeah.
So obviously, the first thing in my mind was like, why didn't you text, call, FaceTime me, show up to where I was at if you were so concerned? Because I knew her sleeping patterns, which is someone that wakes up through the night, several times. And I knew she was going to see where I was at. So I didn't care. I was like, we're fine. If you have a problem, show up. But
But you weren't hiding anything, so you
yeah,
didn't think there was any issue.
Well, now, did the two of you talk about just the boundaries and limits of your relationship? Was it something that was really unusual for you to do, to go out to the bars on your own?
I mean, I don't do it often, but I have done it before and there was no issue.
Okay.
So, and I figured, again, like if she saw me out and had a concern, I figured she would have reached out or at least texted me being like, "Hey, what are you doing out so late? I don't understand." And I would be like, "Oh, I didn't even really notice how late it was. Maybe you're right. And if you're uncomfortable, I have no problem with going home right now. I probably should anyways,
But
or come join me."
it sounds like the issue was not really the issue here. Like, because if it was something that you had done before and it wasn't an issue and you weren't hiding anything, it sounds like maybe she was looking for a fight because maybe she was struggling with her own mental health or something. And it doesn't add up if she knew where you were at, or she could easily call you, FaceTime you, and say, "Where are you?" She could see your location. Why get so angry? Of course, she's drinking at the time, so maybe she's not thinking clearly either.
Well, the other side of things too is, sometimes people who are going through the depression, sometimes they do odd things as a cry for help, right? They might not have the energy, they might not have the assertiveness to say, "Hey, I need you. I need to get some things off my chest. I have so much stress going on." But they might do things in odd ways, and they might also be wanting you to show or prove that you care and kind of fill in that gap where they have difficulty just being direct about what they need.
Yeah,
So that can be one of those things, when you're going through depression, when you're struggling with mental health issues, your communication is not going to be the best either, most
sure.
likely.
So things were explosive at that point, and it led to a breakup, right?
Yeah. Yeah, at the that night, I tried to reason with her, and then she got physical with me, which is just a big no-no, and said some really below the belt stuff that was again beyond my boundaries. And then at that point, I just had to ask her and said, "So, are we breaking up?" And she said, "Yep." And I said, "Are you for real?" And she goes, "Yep." And I go, "All right." And then I just I couldn't, I was at a loss for words at that point already, being, physically and emotionally abused. And I just walked away. I didn't say a word. And I said, in my head, I was like, she can find her own lift. She can find her own way. If she wants to be destructive and have childish behavior, she's going to have to learn, unfortunately, the hard way of, me not being there anymore to help her out with whatever she needs. So,
So,
um,
guys, you left her alone at that point, right? You kind of went
yeah.
into no contact because you
Hmm.
you knew about us I think at that point, right?
Yeah.
So tell us what happened with you and a little like what you struggled with. Did you feel like you had done anything wrong in the relationship or that was making you feel like eating you up inside?
Yeah, I felt like, and this is something I know is, doing the inner work is that, yeah, none of us are perfect. And so because of past relationships, I gained trauma with trust issues. So I had trust issues with her where, I now know that, if you don't have facts or anything, there's no reason to assume, which assumption is a killer. And so I learned through just inner work, and I realized, hey, I'm being insecure, I'm being a bit of a bitch. So I need to stop, and that's something I've been working on and that I struggled with through all my relationships. Um, and I felt bad about that for sure because she had never given me a reason to not trust her. And it's not that I realized that it's not that I didn't trust her. It was the fact that I had trauma with trust that made me just in general not be able to trust, essentially, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it wasn't the person, it was me. So that's what I'm trying to say. And I tried to tell her that. I said, it's not you. It's not that I don't trust you. It's just I'm struggling with trust myself.
Mhm.
So that's what I thought about and felt really bad about, and have been working on myself. And anxiety, obviously anxiety too. So the separation anxiety was there. And I think those were my two downfalls in this last relationship where, as time went on, being the anxious attachment style, a couple hours would go by, 3 hours, 4 hours would go by, and I would want to check in. And there's no reason for that when I should have been a little even more focused on what I was doing. Um, but it was a little confusing in the relationship because she was also anxious, on top of being avoidant. So she would have times of anxiety as well. And I could tell because then she'd reach out after, a couple of hours had gone by and just being like, what are you doing? So that was kind of mutual.
Yeah, the insecurities, you got to work on the insecurities because if you're insecure in certain areas, they're going to cause problems in the romantic connection. The more insecurities that we have and we struggle with, the more it's going to lead to friction and fighting and arguing or and losing attraction. Because I really believe that our behavior in a relationship either creates attraction or turns people off.
And I think it does take discernment on choosing which issues to bring up versus not, right? I love that you had said, I have a trust issue. There's nothing that you've done wrong to make me question your trust. This is my issue. And I think sometimes in relationships, we can get tripped up on what is a personal issue, what is something that I'm internally struggling with, versus what is something that's causing me to feel this way or really contributing to this feeling.
So
Absolutely.
after the breakup, you started working hard on yourself, and I'm sure you started to really feel a lot more enlightened as to what was going on in your dynamic, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I like to say, as time went on, the rose-colored glasses started to fall off.
As they do, as they do.
So,
You get
um,
scratched
but
over time.
it was, yeah, all the red tint was getting scratched off. But over time, it took a while. I mean, I had a couple times where I spiraled, and let my emotions consume me and eat me up. And then there was times where I felt freaking amazing and just having, being someone that had created discipline in my routine before all this had happened, through the relationship. I was able to just tell myself, just do what you've been doing. Just do what you've been doing. It'll all get better. Just keep doing what you're doing. And day after day, it didn't really matter how I felt, whether I woke up depressed and didn't want to do anything or felt like $1 million, because I think a lot of people, their emotions are very fresh and up and down after a breakup like mine were. And so it was just, I never knew how I was going to feel the next day, but I just kept doing what I, you know, knew would help me and, was, trying to stay focused on that purpose.
I love that you had these kind of almost, they're almost like mantras that kept you grounded. Something that you had mentioned earlier that a lot of people struggle with are those compulsive thoughts about the breakup. When you're going
Hmm.
I like how you described just how it affected your cognition. It's all you could think about. And then it starts to affect your functioning. Then you're at work and you're just thinking about it, or you're showing up to, I don't know, lecture at school or whatever it might be, and you're crying, uncontrollably because you can't keep it together. This is just constantly cycling through your brain. So I like that you had just these simple mantras of do what you need to do. And there's a really popular self-help book called Un-F Your Life. I'll put it like that.
Oh yeah.
And
I've read that one. It's amazing.
it's a very like action oriented kind of a book. And while, on the channel we talk a lot about feeling your feelings, I do think there is something to being able to get the things done that you need to get done. There is a time and place for everything, including being able to, acknowledge and give your emotions that attention, but also being able to do those things that will propel you forward.
Absolutely.
And it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard.
But especially, after a breakup, you're not sure because part of you wants to get back with that person. Sometimes it's not part of you. Sometimes it's all of you.
All of you,
But
yeah.
in a situation, maybe you're looking at what they did wrong or all their faults. Part of you is like, I want to be with them, but part of you is like, maybe I should try and find somebody else who won't have those
Mm,
issues. So it can be a real struggle to balance that every
mhm.
day. You go
Yeah.
back and forth like a windshield wiper.
Hmm.
Yeah. That's a good way of thinking about it.
You brought up something interesting that I want to dive into a little bit more, just about purpose. Now, you had mentioned that your ex was struggling with mental health issues, and sometimes we see in relationships there can be different roles, and in families too, that people take on. One of those roles is like a rescuer or a nurturer or a caretaker. And sometimes people can take these roles and make that their purpose. So I want to hear a little bit about what your purpose was back then. What would drive you back then that may have not been sustainable for you?
Um, I think it's like so like I do like there's like five things I do in my life, and it was I, up until actually recently I've kind of really figured it out, but it was the fact that I had so many different things as my purpose going on and trying to build them all at once was like the struggle of everything. It was like it was like I was so excited to do all these things, but then, you know, they I was just inching ahead with all of them, as I was getting older and as I am getting older, and it was very frustrating. And while I'm doing these passion projects of mine, that I want to turn into what I can do for the rest of my life, my purpose, I was on top of that. I was, working 1099s and W-2s, and um yeah, it was just really hard. I was jumping from job to job, and to be honest with you, the person that I was with, my ex, like looked down at me on that, judged me for that, and it's okay. I understand because they come from, working one job for 20 years or longer. But yeah, that's my purpose has always been these like five things. And that's what always has keep me so driven, because I'm always doing all of these things all the time, but there was obviously a lot of moments where I lost focus, and one of the big times was, when the breakup happened, juggling five balls, and then you go through a breakup, you just drop them all for a second or two, or
Yeah.
who knows how long.
So take us through like how things are like, with your ex. Have you heard from them at all? Have you had any indirect, direct approaches that you've been thinking about that's been affecting you? Or, maybe because it sounds like maybe part of you wants to be with her and part of you isn't sure at this point.
Yeah, so it's funny that you were bringing that up, because I went through that thought process for a while, probably last month, the fourth month into the breakup. And I was like, I want to be with this person, but at the same time, I don't think this person's right for me anymore, because I'm seeing clearly. And I'm, not only that, I'm getting outside perspective, and, I've got the coaching from you and other people. And um, since we last spoken, there was some, I'd like to say, indirect, direct things that I noticed. Like, for example, getting on my Netflix account and using it, which I just actually noticed recently, because she's the only person that I've given my account information to.
Other
So,
than me,
see,
of course.
right?
Just notice a bunch
So,
of Star Wars being watched.
That's Disney Plus.
Oh my.
so, yeah, so I noticed that was the most recent thing, and that was, this week. I noticed that, I don't know if you remember, but I told you that some of her friends blocked me for God knows what reason, and they unblocked me recently, because I saw some of them, and we all had a great time. So they probably realized, why am I doing this? It's not even my boyfriend. And so that was another interesting thing. On 4th of July was another one where I was actually out of town, and I noticed that she had gone over to one of my very best friend's house for a Fourth of July party, which is where I would have been, and was acting goofy and was singing karaoke just like I would have been, and pretty much doing the exact same thing I was doing. And her, best friend and some others, had to ask my best friend, "Hey, is it okay if we come over?" Which, in my eyes indicated that, they knew they were stepping essentially into quote unquote my territory. And who knows if I would have been there. And I did some research myself, and it essentially just, I kind of got the feeling of they're trying to put themselves in my orbit some way, shape, or form, or hoping that I see that they're in my orbit or something. Because when someone doesn't want to be with you, and I've learned this through you guys, they get out of all of that stuff. They get out of the mutual friend group. They disappear. They do not want to see you. So the
Yeah.
Mhm.
fact that she's been forcing herself into these very close friends of mine is a little odd.
All
So
right. Yeah, because a lot of times if somebody wants to end it, they want nothing to do with you or anybody else and they want to disappear. And
Mhm.
yeah, so showing up at a place where she thought you were going to be is definitely suspicious.
Tell us a little bit about how things have been now since then. Now, you've talked about regaining your purpose and kind of redirecting since the breakup. I know that there are probably some of our viewers that have been through a breakup or are going through a breakup and know what it's like to feel scatter-minded. So, how are you able to take control of your mind again after all of that?
I think it's a combination of things I'm starting to realize myself that kind of added to the success of yeah, regaining control of my mind. It started with, the little like mantras, just like, hey, do what you got to do, and like as simple as get up, make your bed, take your vitamins, take your dog down, make breakfast, do your cardio, go to the gym, get your morning. I always relied on my morning routine to at least get me through like the first part of the day, and then I would feel physically and mentally better just alone with that. And honestly, somehow I was still consumed by the breakup. So there was like half of me that was just like, I like to say it's like I was like a ghost in a shell, I guess is the saying, of myself, like 50% of the time. And then the other 50% of the time I was still myself. So I was like battling with, I feel nothing, don't want to do anything. I feel something, I want to do everything. And it didn't matter. So I just kept to my daily routine, and then realizing instead of just staying cooped up at home, I had to reach out to my friends and talk with my friends. So I happen to be one of the guys that's like, I love to talk about this stuff to my close friends, and I have good friends that would literally let me talk their ear off, or until their ear bleeds about it. So but I would be conscious of that, and sorry, I get it's enough. I got to stop talking about this because eventually it just turns into rumination, which is not healthy. So I didn't want to fall into that negative feedback loop, and only have it be positive. So once it got too much, I would just shut up and try to meditate, which was another thing that really helped me a lot, is meditation, just having silence, even though, you sit there and it's just like all you can hear is their voice, weird memories you haven't even, not weird memories, but just memories you haven't thought that are weirdly intrusive of like really good times that make you want to cry and you miss them. Um, but but I also realized sitting in your feelings like that is actually how you get better. It's hard, and it feels like a knife stabbing into you or whatever, just a terrible feeling at the time. But through the pain, there is progress. And
Yeah. Pain motivates us.
Hmm.
yeah,
Pain really
exactly.
push, motivate us to change and to grow. Sometimes it's because I don't want to ever feel this way again.
Hmm.
You know,
Exactly.
I've got to fix this issue before I wind up in another breakup or in another relationship where my heart is broken.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
have you heard anything from your ex recently? It's been probably not yet.
Yeah, I think it's been, oh my gosh, I'd have to look at my calendar, but or my text messages, but I think the last time she sent a text was when we chatted about about picking up that bike, and I believe that was June 8th. So it's been over a month now, or it might have been May 8th. I have to look, but it's either been a month or two, and that it's finally been actual no contact. Like, because as you know, even the first time when we broke up a year ago, it was the same thing. It was like always a text or something indirect direct from her within a week or two. But this is the longest I've not heard from her. So I'm just like, all
Well,
right, cool.
she did try to show up at the party, or that she did go to the party at the 4th of July where she thought you might have been.
Mm.
So that could have been
Yeah,
something there. Um, so
absolutely.
we'll see if her behavior starts to escalate to try and get your attention more. But at this point, you've done a lot of work. You're feeling much better about yourself since working on yourself, it sounds like.
Yeah, I feel a lot better. I'm away from that feeling of never wanting to feel it again because that's exactly how I felt. I mean, you took the words out of my mind. It was one of the worst feelings of my life. Absolutely.
And so, you're feeling the hard work paying off, and that's a great feeling when you're struggling with so much uncertainty.
One thing that I like that I don't know if you directly shared this, but I'm just interpreting from the things that you're sharing, is thinking about having your own individual purpose while in a relationship. It sounded like when you were in that relationship, your purpose got a bit muddled. And it's always challenging when your partner's going through mental health issues, grief, etc., when, one or both parties is going through that. But it sounds like being able to have that individual purpose is so important to kind of keep that relationship moving forward. And in the case that the relationship doesn't work out, in order to maintain that stability within yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And, something I thought of last night that kind of resonated with me is that I was talking with my parents and they know what I've been up to, my whole life. And they've been very supportive and I'm so appreciative of, having parents like that. But, I sat there and I said, I finally see it now. I have so many of my own projects. I don't need another human being in my life as another project. I can't, like I tried, everything I did. But yeah, it took away from the purpose of my life, which are all these projects that I'm trying to finish. So, at this point, I mean, I want someone that's put together, that's not a project, that's doing similar things that I'm doing, where we can go off and do our own things, which is
Mhm.
healthy, which, space is good sometimes, and not worry about anything, and then come together and have our time. So that's something that kind of just, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't need another project. I got too many already. So,
Absolutely. It's important that both people are relatively in a good place and their mental health is good and they feel good about who they are. For the most part, there are always going to be ups and downs in life with
Mhm.
of
career and
course.
health and friends and family, but you need somebody who can be relatively stable because resilience is important in a
Mhm.
relationship. You
Yeah,
need to be resilient, and your partner needs to be resilient in order to keep taking care of the relationship.
absolutely.
So it sounds like you're coming along, you're feeling good about your progress, you're feeling like you have more clarity and purpose, and you're sticking to the hard work and no contact. If your ex is going to come back, you're wanting to make sure that she is more aligned with herself and can give the relationship what it needs.
Right. And I really like what you said earlier about assumption being a killer. I could see that this whole situation, even the night where you had gone out to kind of let off some steam, assuming things about what the other person is doing or thinking or their intentions, that can create so much tension in a relationship. So I'm hoping that, if it reached the point of repair, that the two of you would be able to communicate with each other more directly and be more vulnerable with the fears and worries that the two of you might have with each other. So I can see that, you've come a long way since the breakup, and it feels good to be able to come back into yourself, to feel like
Absolutely.
yourself again, to have that routine, to start to have that clarity of mind again. And for those of you that are going through a breakup, that will come with time, right? That will come with time,
And effort.
and effort.
He's put
And
in a lot of effort,
yeah, 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 yeah. And that routine, sticking to the discipline and, maintaining that motivation throughout.
even when he didn't want to.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story going through this breakup and, some of the things that you've learned along the way and how you're, you know, getting to a better place within yourself because of a painful situation.
Mm-hmm.
It really can help us grow and change our life.
Right. We really appreciate you sharing your story with us.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure to be a part of it.
Thank
I'm
you
just
so much.
always here to help.
Thanks.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode and caller.
Right.
If you're interested in being on the show, you can go to the website and fill out an email and let us know your situation, and we can consider having you on.
We'd be more than happy to give you our 2 cents.